Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Unbreakable podcast. And if you're viewing us on YouTube, welcome also. We are wrapping up Love Month. Love has been in the air. We started that way.
Yay!
At the beginning of February, love is in the air. We like love. Love is a favorite thing of ours in our marriage and in our family. And so today we're talking about our children and some of the ways that they show love to one another. We think it's really important for siblings to get along. In fact, we so much think siblings should get along that there is not sibling rivalry in our house. We outlawed it. It is not a thing. We do not do it. And basically, we feel that way because the Word of God tells us that we are to love one another and we're to love our neighbor as ourself.
Yeah.
And so we always told our children from the get-go, from the very beginning, that your neighbor is the person closest to you.
Right.
So I am to treat Brian, the one closest to me, as my neighbor and love him like I would love myself. And we taught our children the same thing. They were to love one another as they loved themselves. They were to be good to one another and to enjoy one another and play well together and do all those things that they did as little kids. And there was just no other option in our household. There was no option, but we love one another. That worked really well as we were having children. We would spend the 7 months that we knew about it, 7 months that we knew about it, preparing the children we already had for the one that was coming and how we were going to love that next child.
Right.
And we would build excitement about it. We would talk about it, and we would just kind of dream with them about having this new sibling and what that was going to mean. And so they were always looking forward to adding a sibling to our family.
Yeah.
And that meant that they were more apt to want to love that sibling because we had built excitement about it.
Right.
You have anything to say about that?
Well, I want to talk about sibling rivalry because the Bible really talks about it pretty clearly several times. And when sibling rivalry is allowed to exist, it causes generational issues.
Yes.
Don't believe me? Cain and Abel.
Mm-hmm.
Sibling rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
Cain killed his brother because his brother brought a better sacrifice than he did. Sibling rivalry. And it caused issues for the next generation. It caused Cain's family to be cursed.
Yeah. And several generations
down,
there was another murderer. So.
Yeah, in his family because of Cain.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob and Esau. They were a sibling rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, eventually they got it together, but man, for about 60 years, that was not good, and it wasn't good at all.
Mm-hmm.
You got Isaac and Ishmael. That rivalry is still being played out worldwide because you got
the child of promise.
The child of promise, which is Israel and the Jewish nation and the Jewish people.
Yep.
You got the child of impatience.
Yeah.
You want to put it that way, from Abraham and Ishmael. And that has birthed, the Islamic nation, the Muslim nation, which is vast and large.
And honestly, Abraham and Sarah did not foster non-sibling rivalry there.
No.
They actually probably fed into it and propagated it. Yeah, because
they
created a bigger
issue. They kicked the other mom and baby out of the house.
Yeah.
Which in that culture wasn't the norm, actually.
She ran off, but
yeah, they got rid of her. And so that caused issues. And you go on and on multiple times. Absalom with one of David's sons, he was an issue with his brothers.
Yeah.
There were different issues all through Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Sibling rivalry is not cute. It's not a phase that they're just going to naturally grow out of.
Right.
It's something that we as parents have to take initiative on and raise them in the way that they should go, quoting Proverbs, training them up in the correct way so that when they're older, they can still remain friends and compatriots and work together in whatever way that God puts it for them to work together as brothers and sisters and do those things. So I think that particular topic, it's not taught at all. I've rarely taught it. I don't think I've ever heard a pastor teach on sibling rivalry and why it's such a bad thing.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. We teach on family, we teach on different things, but we don't teach that particular element of family shouldn't be in your household.
Right.
Now, we have biblically what's called an Adamic or Adamic nature. So we have sin in our heart.
Yeah.
When we're born, we're born into sin.
Right.
So it's going to be a natural thing for your children to want to gravitate towards that issue.
Right.
It's on you and me
to add the supernatural.
To add the supernatural and to recognize it and flip that.
Yep, turn it around. So that means from the time they're small, we start encouraging them and teaching them how to be gentle with one another, how to be how to share their toys, how to share their things that they have in their room. We teach them how to interact with one another in a kind way.
Yeah.
And so we're doing all the things that we know to do to help them make friendship between siblings rather than rivalry. When they get older, then you have to kind of move into the whole teach them how to say things that don't offend their brother or sister. And so they have to learn how to speak correctly toward them and nurture that and encourage them to use good words towards their siblings.
Yeah, and we got to teach them how to respect one another.
Yes.
Be considerate of one another and recognize that we're not all in the same stage of life together. A quick story, quick example. We have 5 kids, 5 children, and of course our oldest is our oldest. Profound.
She's in charge.
And she is.
Yes. But
when she finished her schooling, her high school schooling, and we gave her more freedom after she graduated. We homeschooled her all the way through her senior year, and at the end of her senior, we gave her a lot more freedom because now she's an adult.
Right.
And she had to be considerate of the schedule of everyone else in the house. She didn't move out yet, but we gave her freedom socially and other things. She got to go do things without asking, but she just needed to inform us what she was doing, where she was going. But she could just set her own schedule.
Her rules changed a little bit
because
she became an adult.
Quite a bit. Now, I watched the 2 just under her. One was 3 years younger, one was 6 years younger. Is that right? Hey, I got it right. And I watched them like, well, I don't get to do that. Little sibling rivalry began to
just a little
sneak in. And so I actually sat down with the 2 of them and talked to them, met with them, talked to them. I was like, have you noticed that your sister gets to do? Well, yeah, we've noticed. I'm like, okay. And so a couple things. Number one, I said, and you know this verse because we used it in different kid videos that we learned it from. And it's, we rejoice with those who rejoice and we weep with those who weep. Yep. So you have a choice here. You can rejoice with your sister that she has this newfound freedom, which also came with newfound responsibility. So she has that. And I explained both sides to that, to the other 2 children. I said, and you can rejoice with her and be quite aware that, for you in just a couple, 2, 3 years, it's your turn.
Yeah.
And you just a short time after that, it's going to be your turn. And you can rejoice knowing and seeing, oh, I get to do this coming up. Yeah. Or you can get mad and bitter because you're not getting to do what your sister's getting to do. Right. You're not getting to act the way she's getting to act. And even though you have responsibility and you have freedoms in our house, you don't have those freedoms yet. And so we had to teach them, even at an older age, because, one was in high school and one was finishing junior high, at that age. I said, you need to be aware that those responsibilities along with those privileges are coming to you. Right. But that helped eliminate that because we want them to celebrate each other as each brother and each sister, gains employment, gets married, has children, all the things of life that go for them. We want them, and if the things don't go well with them, we also want them to be there and be considerate and help them. There's two sides to that coin, and for us, I'm looking at Leslie's notes here. The third note she's on is there's no other option.
Yep.
We didn't give an option.
No.
To not love one another. We didn't give an option to not care for one another. There was no other option. And if they tried to take another option, we stopped that pretty quickly.
Yep. Yeah, we redirect. We just redirect it back. Our family is very much focused on loving one another in all the different seasons of life. And we see that more now because our children are older now, because they've all become adults now. We can see, when our oldest has had babies, the other ones are right there. They're wanting to rejoice with them. They're wanting to hold the baby, wanting to participate in their new nieces and nephews. We are not a family that just looks at each other from afar, even though they've all grown up. They could just stay in their own space and, yeah, that's great. But no, we go. All of our family goes. We
still interact.
We are very interactive with one another and what's going on because we love one another. We literally, the kids, they text with one another. They share social media with one another. They're all over being their best for each other, even to the point of our author daughter has a fan club now because of her siblings, and a couple other people that she knows have started a fan club for her because they're supporting her. That's what they do. They support everything that sibling is about, and they try to rejoice in it and celebrate it, and they just interact well because they've been taught to love one another. They're not fighting for our attention.
No,
we never had a lot of that either. It's natural for kids to want to be the one that mom and dad are paying attention to.
Well, I'll jump on that for a quick second. Didn't mean to interrupt you. When they were little, like I traveled some. I would go do different things for business or for ministry. And sometimes Leslie and I traveled together. Sometimes I traveled for not long periods of time, for maybe a few days away. And there were times where I would see something I was out and about that made me think of one of my children. So I would buy that object for that child. But what I didn't do was I did not feel obligated to buy 4 or 5 items for the children just because one of them was getting something. So we taught them that we celebrate each of them individually. We do celebrate them collectively, but and it goes to what Leslie's point was just making, that they know they don't have to fight for our attention.
Right.
We'll give them individual attention, even while we're giving them attention as a family unit.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. So now I don't know where I was. You disrupted my thought, but that's okay. So anyway, they didn't fight for our attention. Because they knew that we were giving them attention. We were loving them in that way, and they didn't need to be jealous of one another. We didn't have a lot of jealousy going on. Now you might have children who have jealousy for the other, but that's another place where you just teach them to love that person. Pray for. If you teach them to pray for their sibling, that usually diffuses all of the jealousy because they're praying for that. That prayer is a really good antidote for a lot of things.
It really
but it stops that, and so just encourage your children to pray for one another. We had prayer time together every day. We were a homeschool family. We were home together, so we had prayer every day all together. We made time to stop and pray, and if there were needs, or if somebody was going through something, or if they were having an issue with something, we prayed for each other. And we showed love in that way. That's another way that that they showed love for one another. They prayed for each other. Also, we have a special needs child, and so and our baby is like, we had like three years apart, and then we had our special needs child, and then it was 5 years before our baby. So the baby's kind of her own thing on the end, and Matthew is our special needs child. So all through the time that they were growing up, we taught them about deferring to the younger one. So this was kind of a rule in our house. If there were something that they were fighting over, or they all wanted to use something, a game, a toy, whatever. Then we kind of enforced the rule of the older ones needed to be mature enough to defer to the younger ones and allow them to use it first or see it first, and then they would get their turn. But we all deferred to the younger, and that was another way that we taught them how to love one another. They were showing their not favoritism, but they were showing their consideration for the others around them. And especially, that's a maturity thing. When they're little, they don't show consideration for other people because it's kind of selfish when you're little. You have to grow out of selfishness. But as they got older, then they had an opportunity to share their things with the younger ones. And so defer to the younger was definitely a thing that we used. I had a specific that I wanted to bring out. Our second daughter is a laid back, what we would call a phlegmatic personality. She is very calm. She doesn't get flustered about things very often. She's really just kind of happy-go-lucky as a child. She was very friendly, peaceful, kind. She's all those things. When she was 9 is when we were pregnant with our last child. She was convinced, and rightly so, it was fine. She was convinced this baby was going to be her best friend for life. She was so excited because she was right at that age where they love babies, and she was so excited about this new sibling. And she knew it was I'm pretty sure we must have told them it was a girl, because she was excited to have a sister who was younger than her, and she was convinced they were going to be best friends forever. Megan just sowed seeds with her words about this new baby and how they were going to be friends, and it was going to be awesome. And our baby came, Abby came, and she was sweet and she was wonderful, but Abby was a very, 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 very strong-willed child, and she knew how to push every button that Megan had that Megan didn't know she had. I mean, just seriously was contentious between them.
Yeah, bad.
And really bad. Like we never had any pair of siblings have this issue. It was like crazy. And so we've really had to work with them on getting along and being kind to one another. And Megan being the older one, we always, we would tell you're 9-10 years older than she is. You have to be the more mature one, and you have to work with where she's at. And Megan was just crushed that this person that she knew was going to be her best friend forever was so contentious with her. Mm-hmm. And we worked on it. We didn't allow them to be at odds, constantly. We worked on it, but really it was something that was a daily thing that we were trying to diffuse and get over. And it took until Abby finally came into her teen years, maybe halfway through high school. Yeah. Suddenly it clicked. All of the seeds that Megan sowed, her good words of we're going to be best friends, just clicked and came into motion, and harvest came. And Megan and Abby are bestest of friends. They are inseparable. They love each other. They stand up for each other. They encourage one another. They are everything that they want to be best friends in. Abby is the starter of the fan club, for Megan. So it's just, it took time, and it took growth, and it took maturity. But those seeds, those words that Megan planted about her sister, they have come to pass. Yes. I want to encourage you, if you have a child who doesn't seem to get along with the others, or you have a child who wants to get along with somebody but is just being rejected, whatever the situation, the scenario is for you, sow good words. sow good words, pray good words, find scriptures to speak over the children.
Yep.
Let them speak them over each other.
Yep.
And develop that relationship. Let God come in and enter into that and make it into what it is supposed to be. Don't give up, because just because it seems like there's contention that will never be resolved, it doesn't have to be that way. And so keep sowing in the word of God, keep sowing in good confessions over that whole relationship, and do everything you can to foster love and joy and peace between them, and just watch what God will do. I just want to encourage you in that.
Yeah, and I want to jump in and add to what Leslie was just saying, is this. If you pay attention to that account of Megan and Abby's life, you're looking at 12, 13 years of frustration, 12, 13 years of, I thought this was going to be my best buddy, it's not. 12, 13 years of the other one going, I don't even want to be your friend. 12, 13 years of us as parents, like, we're going to kill some people. Seriously, I mean, 12, 13 years. We're just being transparent with you. You know, you're talking over a decade worth of effort, tears, prayer. God, why not? Why, where, when, how?
Praying.
God, intervene, all those things. And then, like Leslie said, all of a sudden, over a decade later, all of a sudden, it shifts.
Yep.
All of a sudden, everything goes into alignment. All of a sudden, harvest time came, and it's remained, and they've become stronger and stronger and stronger friends throughout the last 6-7 years. And so it's really become something that's kind of special to watch and see and listen to. And which has been good, because Megan, growing up, was best friends with her older sister, but now her older sister has moved away, gotten married, has a family. Kind of hard to maintain that same kind of. They're still friends. They're still best friends. I would say Megan and Abby are best friends, but
but they have still good
really
relationship.
They're really good close friends, but she kind of lost something when Hannah moved away, and then God saw to it that got replaced, and helped her in regards to that. And so it may be that you're watching and you have children and you're in the middle of this, and it feels messy, and it feels like the answer is not ever going to come. Well, let's encourage you. The answer is going to come. You just have to stay in faith.
Yes.
You just have to stay in prayer. You have to believe God is your source. Yet God is the one who will bring the answer, because we didn't have the answer. We did everything we had learned through the first 4 children. And some of that worked, and some of that didn't work with Abby.
But we had to keep loving. And we had to keep encouraging them to love.
Absolutely.
And that's really what our topic is love one another.
Love.
And so we had to keep working on the love. Keep working on the love. Keep working on the love.
Thinking of 1 Corinthians, love bears all things.
Yes.
Well, here you go.
Endures all things.
Endures all things. You're talking a decade plus of enduring and bearing. And so it's worth it. It's worth the effort to see the result.
Definitely. The last thing we want to talk about today is what we call spouse practice. We have utilized this.
I do it every day with Leslie.
Not what we're talking about, dear. Okay, so spouse practice is something that we used with our kids, our children, to encourage them to think about, especially I think when they got to be like junior high to high school age, we use this mostly. But it was the idea that you should treat your siblings in a way that you would want to treat your spouse. So like with our son, we didn't want him to be picking on his sisters mercilessly. We wanted him to learn it's okay to joke. It's okay to tease here and there, but you can't like overboard it, because then you cause distress in your siblings, which would be like you would cause distress to your spouse, and you don't want that in your marriage coming up, so it was just a way of thinking forward to, would I want to treat my spouse that way? So we also use that as a way to train our sons to open doors for their sisters, to pull up the car and pick them up, just polite etiquette kind of things. We had, and they're very good at it. Even our special needs son will hold the door now. Thankfully, he used to just open the door and walk through it, but now he'll hold the door for everybody, so it's good. But also the other way around too. We wanted our daughters to remember that they needed to honor their future husbands, and so they needed to be aware of how they were treating their brothers, so that they could learn and practice being honoring to their spouse. It was just a way for us to encourage them to think about their future, think about how they were going to love in their future relationships, and employ that in a way that was safe. Our family is safe to work on that, and if they blew it, it's not going to cause like a divorce or something. So
right.
There was unconditional love happening in our family, so they could go ahead and practice things. So our daughters learned how to make meals, how to serve, how to be hospitable, how to encourage their brothers, because their words are very important. It's important to be able to encourage your spouse. So they learned things like that. The guys learned to be protective of their sisters.
Yep.
They also were not allowed to be disrespectful to their sisters. So Brian had an incident with our son. Do you want to
Sure, I can talk about that. We found out that Scott was bullying Megan.
I think because he just found out he had some power he didn't know he had.
he hit testosterone
Yes.
years. And he was becoming a young man. He was shifting from boy to man.
Right.
And he was starting to fill his oats and and his voice is changing, and he's becoming a young man. Well, that can be intimidating to a young girl. And so he found out he could intimidate his sister Megan, and he was intimidating her and bullying her. And basically told her not to tell anybody, because that's what bullies and intimidators do, right? And they don't want that to be found out. Well, we were having a conversation one day, and it's been going on for some time. Not like years, but
no, just for
a couple, 2 or 3 months maybe.
Yeah, maybe
at the outset. But Megan was talking to her mom, and I was privy to the conversation, and all of a sudden I was like, "What? He did what?" And like, huh? And I looked at Leslie and said, "I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix it right now, and I'm going to probably do it in a way that you're not going to like as his mom. So if you can't like what I'm doing, you need to leave the house." Because what I'm going to do is going to be a very strong response. I'm not reacting, I'm responding.
It was becoming a man thing.
It was a man thing. And it was teaching him how to treat a woman thing from one man to another. And he was treating my daughter, not just his sister, my daughter, in a way that I will not put up with. So we're at the house. I yell upstairs, "Hey, buddy, come on down, blah, blah, blah." He has no idea what's about to happen to him. His world's about to shift. He has no idea. He's what, 13, 14?
Yeah.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. So he comes down, and he's standing next to me. "Yeah, what's up?" And I grab him. I pick him up. I slam him against the wall. I take him about 4 to 6 inches up off the ground, and I get up in his face. I'm like, and he thinks his dad has completely lost his mind, and I've completely flipped out. He had no idea what I was doing or why I was doing it. And I went literally nose to nose with him. I'm like, "Does this scare you?" And he's like, and he started to tear up. I'm like, "You feel intimidated?" For those on the podcast, I'm shaking my head, yes. And so I looked at him and said, "How do you think Megan feels when you intimidate her?" And you can see that "oh no, oh crap" moment go across his eyes, and he knew he was busted. And I looked at him and said, "You will never, ever treat my daughter like that ever again. And I catch you doing that with your spouse or some other girl, you and I are going to have a problem. The next time I'm going to put you through the wall, not on the wall. Do you understand me?" And he's crying, shaking his head, yes. And So I made him go sit on the couch, and I walked away, and I looked up. He said, "You do not go in there and love him. Do not go in there and comfort him. Do not go mother him in this moment. He doesn't need a mother in this moment. He needs a father." And she's like, I say, "I know you don't like it, but trust me on this." And so I gave it 5-10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went in and sat next to him. And he was still kind of, not kind of, he was really shook up. And I'm like, "Do you understand why I did what I did? And do you understand what I said?" And he goes, "Yes, sir, I do." I said, "Are we good? We're gonna stop that?" Because yeah. And I think in that moment we changed the trajectory of where he could have gone as a young man. And here's the thing: to this date, because you're talking over a decade ago, to this date, he treats. We call them the Wonder Twins.
Yeah.
Him and Megan.
They are twins 3 years apart.
Yeah, and they're
like, very much alike.
And they're almost inseparable. And the love, the care, and the compassion he shows for her is amazing.
Yeah.
I think if we had never found out, if he had gotten by with doing what he was doing with the intimidation and bullying, that would have changed who he was in his personality, which made no sense to us because he came out nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a real variation from who he really was.
We joked that the first 2 words he said were "please" and "thank you."
Yeah, definitely.
He just came out kind and nice from the womb. So for him to even act that way was really an aberration for him.
Yes,
it wasn't something that we would have even. That's why he was getting by with it, because it's something we wouldn't have even
thought he would try.
He would try or do.
Yeah.
And if Megan had just said, "Scott, doing it's like, really, are you sure?" But no, when I heard her and heard the intimidation in her voice, I'm like, "Oh wow, I need to fix this now."
Yeah.
And it changed, it shifted, it fixed. Scott hates this story, by the way, but it shifted.
It's not really who he is. It really was something not like him at all. And so we're so glad that he shifted.
Yeah.
And he shifted actually to the point where he actually takes his 2 sisters that are at home still on dates. They have sibling dates.
Yeah.
And he goes out and he treats them the way he would treat
a spouse.
And they receive love from him so well because he is so good to them.
Yeah.
And it's an awesome thing. When they got old enough, they could drive and do all things. And he's making his own money, so he treats them.
Yeah.
And treats them well. And
for example,
another way for them to love each other.
Megan just had another birthday the other day, and Scott kidnapped her. And took her out and took her to the bookstore. Took her to Barnes and Noble, and said, 4 books. Any one of them that you want, I got it. Take your time. Yeah. And so they spent some time at Barnes and Noble because he limited her to 4 books, and that's not easy to do when you're Megan.
Megan's the book lover.
And so, but no, and so he speaks love to them.
Yeah.
In their love languages, he loves them. He takes care of them, and he does it for other people as well. And he's become such a quality person. But I think that moment shifted him, and he had to learn. Because that was spouse practice. Yeah, he had to learn that you don't treat someone that way, and you certainly don't treat your spouse that way.
Right.
And if you're treating your sister that way, somewhere down the road you're going to treat your spouse that way.
Yeah.
And that's unacceptable.
Right.
And so that's that story.
So we taught our kids to love one another from the time they were little. They loved one another.
Yeah.
Through the years, they learned how to learn differently in different situations and in different ways and means. But even now, as adults, they all really, truly love one another.
Yeah.
And they will go all the way out of their way for each other. They will go the last mile for each other. They are just really committed to one another.
That's right.
And we think that's the best way to have family, is to love one another and to love your neighbor in your house, the one closest to you, as yourself.
Yeah.
In one of the last podcasts, I had read from 1 Corinthians 13 about what love is. And so I'm known for putting scripture on the walls everywhere. And my children grew up that way, with scripture on the walls. And we always had scriptures we were memorizing and stuff. And so one of the ones that made it onto the bathroom wall quite often is that 1 Corinthians 13, those verses. And they know it, and they know how to live it, and they know what it means, because they have been challenged in it and have put it to use, and so they love one another. It's really good. It's how we live our life. loving one another.
2 final thoughts. Number 1 is take these principles, put them into action in your family. If the kids are already older, it's okay. Start using them.
Love.
And start loving them. Teach them these principles, and begin to do that. That's number 1. That's kind of a wrap for the podcast. Number 2, if you notice, I didn't say as much as I normally do in this podcast, not because I don't have things to say, because I always have things to say, but because I enjoy my wife when she has something that she's passionate about, and this is something she's exceptionally passionate about. And if you enjoyed her wisdom and the insight that she was giving you, the principles she was giving you, I'm going to make another shameless plug here. And we have a book that's releasing March 10th, but you can order it now. Go to the unbreakablefamily.com, and on the front page we're highlighting the book that she's written, and she's a newly published author. And it's called The Family Manual, and all this wisdom, all this insight, all these principles that she's talking about in these snippets, in these podcasts. You get them 30 minutes at a time. You can get a lot of that in the book, and she talks about everything from praying in a spouse that you want to be engaged, all the way to grandparenting as a Christian grandparent. So you can go there. We conveniently put a buy now button on there for you. Again, go to the unbreakablefamily.com and get more of the wisdom that my wife has, because it's good. And I'm not just saying it because it's my wife. I'm saying it because I would buy the book whether I knew her or not, because it is something that's needed. No one, everybody's like, man, I wish they had a manual for this. Well, now you do. and so you can buy it. So that's my shameless plug for my wife and our team and what we're doing. But hopefully you'll learn something from this. And we're, like we said, we pray for you on a weekly basis, and we're believing for God to do great things for you as a couple and for your family as well. So with that said, God bless you. We love you, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.